Welcome to another episode of Mike's Money Picks. Today on the podcast, the college basketball season rolls on, and while we have a Final Four in the for real NCAA tournament, we've got a whole nother brand new tournament that is going on. It is called the College Basketball Crown. It tips off this Monday, March 31st, and DraftKings is offering a 4-game slate on the first round of games on Monday. So we are going to be breaking it down. We're going to talk about all 4 games that are going to take place on Monday. We're going to tell you what you can expect from each game, as well as who needs to be in or out of your DFS lineups on DraftKings and FanDuel, as well as any additional info and stats that you might want to make some player props or parlays or bets for these 4 games in the College Basketball Crown. Now, I got to say, this is going to be the probably most heartburn-inducing slate of the year, because what we have right now is we have a tournament that is not for any real discernible prize going on, with a whole lot of teams whose seasons were essentially over 2 weeks ago. The transfer portal opened last Monday. And so we've got a lot of teams with a lot of guys in the portal. And we really don't know whether those guys in the portal are going to play or not play. So what we're going to do a lot on this episode, it's going to be a lot of information coming at you fast. We're going to let you know every single guy on all these teams that are in the portal, and whether they're expected to play or not, and kind of make some conjectures about who is going to be starting and getting minutes in place of those guys that are in the portal if they were in fact not playing in this game. Now, another thing that's kind of annoying about this slate is the way that DraftKings does start times for tournament slates, where they move the times up, I think is just ludicrous for this slate, because we're probably not going to have starting lineups by the time that these games lock on DraftKings. So really, if you're playing this slate, my number one piece of advice is don't wager any money that you cannot afford to lose. Like there's going to be some thrown away lineups on this slate because, you're going to play a guy and, turns out he's not playing. Or you're going to play a guy that you think is going to start and, the guy that is starting in front of him that's in the portal is actually playing. So just, beware of what you're getting into with this slate. But we're going to give you guys all the information that is available to us here currently, and hopefully help you guys make the best decisions, give you guys the best information possible to make some winning DFS lineups and player props and parlays. So let's go ahead. We got 4 games to break down. Let's go ahead and dive right into it. All right, so the first game of the day is Utah taking on Butler. This is a pretty juicy game environment. Now, keep in mind, when we go over all these numbers, they are KenPom totals, not sportsbook totals, and also they are taken from the actual sample size of games that we've had of these teams playing in the regular season and in their conference tournaments. So the numbers that you're listening to are probably not exactly indicative of the quality of teams that are going to be playing, because, some of these teams have guys in the portal. So KenPom has this first game, Utah and Butler, projected to be 78-77 in favor of Butler. That is a game total of 155 points, which is actually the highest on the entire slate. And big reason why is because both these teams are going to play at pretty solid tempo, right? Utah ranks 92nd, Butler ranks 166th, and neither of these teams are all that great at defense. Utah ranks 83rd, Butler ranks 148th. So just 2 teams are going to play pretty fast and not play a whole lot of defense. And Utah is a team that racks up a lot of DraftKings points. They lead the country in assist rate, and they're also an elite rebounding team. So that's multiple ways that you can put up a lot of fantasy points in a hurry, right? Now, in terms of Utah's rotation, here's where it gets weird. So the first guy we got to talk about is Ezra Asar. He did not play in the conference tournament against Central Florida. They said it was due to a knee injury. Not much was, kind of revealed other than that. And basically, I am not expecting him to play in this one. Could he play? Yeah, it wouldn't be like the biggest shock in the world, but it just seems very reasonable to me that they would shut him down and he would not play in this one. And then you have a ton of guys that are in the portal. You got to remember, Utah's a team that fired their coach midseason, so it's not shocking to see a lot of guys already out the door, considering that, the coach that recruited them is out the door. So in the portal already, we have Keanu Dawes, Hunter Erickson, Miro Little, Lawson Lovering, Hunter Erickson, I already said Hunter Erickson, my bad, and Jake Wallen. Now, Jake Wallen is the most interesting one out of all this, because there's reports out there, like his transfer portal declaration was kind of vague. There's reports out there that he might suit up and play in this one. If he does, and he plays $3,000, if you get that starting lineup, with this being the first game, you will have this starting lineup before the game starts. He could be real interesting, because he was real good to end the season, and certainly if he's at a price tag of $3,000, he should absolutely be exceeding that. But with that max exodus in the portal, here's who I would be projecting to be the starter. That's if Asar is out and if everybody in the portal is not playing. The starting lineup I would project to be Gabe Madsen, Mike Sharvjomps, Mason Madsen, Caleb Lohner, and Zach Keller. That would be the projected starting five, right? So let's go ahead and talk about them. The only two usual starters that you would see in that group are Gabe Madsen and Mike Sharpjumps. Madsen is a super three-point dependent, shot dependent guard, but if he's going to be taking all the shots, he could rack up fancy points in a hurry. Sharpjumps is a bigger guard that is not the most efficient shooter, but he can get you a ton of peripheral stats because he's just really good in transition, really good ball handler, and definitely a big-time assist, block, and steal guy. So definitely a guy that can get you a ton of DraftKings points in a hurry. And really, what had been preventing Sharpjumps from reaching like maximum heights in terms of DFS was his minute totals. And if everybody's out for this game that's in the portal, he's going to have to play a ton of minutes. So I really do like the idea of Sharpjumps at $5,700. Those are the only two usual starters. Mason Madsen had been a rotational player throughout most of the season, but he was kind of out of the rotation at the end. But kind of like his brother, he's a super shot-happy guy. If he comes in and he plays 30-plus minutes and he knocks down a few threes, he's going to really pay off that salary at $3,300. And then Zach Keller at $3,600. He is a Wake Forest transfer that was pretty solid at Wake. Filled in for a while when Efton Reed was not eligible for the NCAA. Which is a whole nother story. But basically, when he's been at Utah, when guys have been hurt, he came in and played some serviceable minutes, right? Like against UCF, he was 14 minutes, 13 fancy points. That's not bad, considering with all of their other big men either injured or in the portal. If he's playing $3,600 and plays 30-plus minutes, he can get you a ton of DraftKings points, right? So really early, right off the bat, we've got a ton of guys on Utah between Keller and Madsen and even Caleb Lohner, who I don't really know. Like he's just kind of the only guy left if Asar is out and Wallen actually stays in the portal and doesn't play. He's kind of like the only guy left to play. Judging by the rates, I would rather play Keller or Madsen. But early on in this first game, you've got some really good value plays in Keller and Madsen and Lohner that you could play if we get the news on this starting lineup, right? Now, Butler is not a team that has that issue. They're largely intact. Butler is a team that does not generate a lot of blocks or steals. So they don't get you DraftKings points that way. And that actually, to me, gives a boost to Utah. It means that Utah is going to be able to get their shot up early and often against them. But for Butler, they only have one injury. It is Finley Bizjack. He did not play in the second half against St. John's. It's an ankle injury. Whether or not he plays in this one, I don't know. If he is out, be a big-time boost in minutes to Colby King, but Colby King is not a big-time usage player. Even when he plays a lot of minutes, he doesn't do a whole lot. Maybe he could be a punt play at $3,400, but I would rather play one of these guys that is like a boosted starter from a transfer portal normal starter, right? I rather would not play a guy like Colby King, who's just a usual bench player that is turning into a starter, right? Basically, the only other guy you need to know is Augusto Cassia is in the transfer portal, but he hasn't played since December. That's not big time news there. So the projected starting lineup would be Colby King, Jamil Telfort, Pierre Brooks, Patrick McCaffrey, and Bowden Kapke at center. Kapke and Screen are largely splitting minutes at the center position. It kind of inhibits the upside of both of them, but Kapke has been a really solid option lately now that he's kind of playing more than his share of 50% than Screen. And Kapke at $4,700 on normal slate, I would be all over him at that price. But there's just a ton of value on this slate if the guys that we expect to be in the portal are in the portal. And so he kind of doesn't project as one of the better value plays because of that. Now, Jamil Telfort is a guy that I could see having a huge game in this one. He's just kind of a do-it-all like wing that can really rack up some stats, like is pretty good in his peripheral rates, will get you some steals, really good like slasher going to the rim, not the most efficient three-point shooter. And that's kind of the profile that I think would give Utah trouble, is a guy that can get to the rim and finish at the rim as opposed to just standstill shooters, because that's kind of what the rest of Butler's lineup is. Brooks and McCaffrey are really just like knockdown three-point shooters. If they get going hot in this game, they can give you a good performance, especially if they contribute in other ways, but it's just not really that easy to project them for that. Now, next up, we have the George Washington and Boise State game, a little mid-major game in the college basketball crown. KenPom has this one projected to be 74-66 in favor of Boise State. That is a total of 140 points, which ranks as the lowest on this slate, but that's not even that poor of a total, honestly. The reason why is because you got two teams that don't really look to push the tempo, right? Like George Washington ranks 211th. Boise ranks 290th in tempo. And they're not the best offensive teams. George Washington's 150th in offensive efficiency. Boise State is 51st. And really, when you look at George Washington, they're a team that is very poor at three-point shooting. They're a team that is very poor at defensive rebounding. So give Boise's offensive rebounding guys a little bit of a boost. In terms of George Washington, they're fairly intact with the exception of one guy. Basically, Trey Moss is injured, has been injured for a while. I would not expect him to play in this game. And then Darren Buchanan is a guy that has entered the transfer portal. It is not on his DraftKings player card. I don't think he plays. Like, maybe DraftKings knows something I don't, but he is officially in the transfer portal. What's interesting, though, is that he has been coming off the bench. He's one of their best players, one of their highest usage players, big-time rebounder, big-time scorer. But he's been coming off the bench lately. He got hurt midseason, and kind of when he came back, they just kind of brought him off the bench to not mess with the flow. And so their starting lineup has actually been Christian Jones, Trey Autry, Gerald Drumgoole, Sean Hansen, and Rafael Castro. So if Buchanan is out, the most obvious beneficiaries to me would be Drumgoole and Hansen, who kind of play similar positions as kind of the 3-4 to Buchanan. Drumgoole is a guy that has a high usage rate when he's out there, doesn't play a whole lot of minutes usually. And so if he were to play max minutes, you could see a big time game out of him because somebody's got to take up all the shots that Buchanan is. And then Hansen's another guy that could see boosted minutes. He's another guy kind of like Drumgoole that's not a bad fantasy point per minute player. He doesn't quite have the same usage rate that Drumgoole does, so I would kind of prefer to take my shot at Drumgoole. I'd rather have a guy who's going to actually be shooting the ball. And then the other interesting thing is Rafael Castro. We got to talk about him. It's just a misprice on DraftKings' part. Like, regardless of who's in the portal or out of the portal, this is not a guy that should be $6,500 on DraftKings. He averages 33 DraftKings points a game. At $6,500, you would be wanting 26 DraftKings points to hit 4x value. And you look at that, he has literally done that in every single game going back to literally the start of 2025. Literally. Right? Every game that has a 2025 on the calendar, he's hit at least 26 DraftKings points, some of which have been over 40, two of which was over 50. So you're looking at just a big time performer. He was just a beast all A10 season. He's a big guy. He's a big. He's transferred down to the A10. He's really good, and he should not be at this price tag. To me, he's the easiest click on the slate. Christian Jones is another guy that I am interested in. So Christian Jones has a very high usage rate for this team, but has generally not been getting super high minute totals. But that really did flip in the A10 tournament. In the two games they played, he had 33 and 32 minutes. So if he's going to continue to see 30 plus minutes, a guy with his usage rates, and he's pretty high assist rate player as well. To me, he's very viable at $5,500. He's a guy I definitely want to get in my player pool. The only other guys they're going to play that I have not mentioned yet for George Washington, Jacoy Hutchinson, and Ty Bevins will play off the bench. Hutchinson is their best bench player, aside from Darren Buchanan, and he generally plays quite a bit. So that's just another name to look out for. All right, now on the Boise side, Boise is one of the most intact teams in this tournament. They do have a few guys in the portal, but they are all guys who were not like big time players, right? Like, not anybody who is playing serious minutes at the end of the season is in the portal or injured for this Boise team. So their starting lineup in this game should be Alvaro Cardenas, Pearson Carmichael, Andrew Meadow, Tyson Dagenhart, and Omar Stanley. All right, so let's talk about those guys. Their key bench players also are Jay Keene, Emmanuel Ubo, and Julian Bowie. Those are their key bench players. All right, so let's talk about who their best players are. Well, they have a very clear big three. It's Dagenhart, Cardenas, and Meadow. And basically what ends up happening is these three guys play basically the entire game. And then you end up with everybody else kind of splitting minutes right down the middle, 50-50. Dagenhart, to me, is a really, really good play on this one. He's a really good rebounder. George Washington is not a good rebounding team. Dagenhart's up here at $3,400. And he definitely has the ability to go get you 4x salary. He doesn't really have a whole lot of ceiling games in here, but definitely really good chance that he's going to give you a really solid game in this one, because I think George Washington is a matchup where you can play a rebounder like Dagenhart. And then Cardenas is kind of the engine that makes this offense go for Boise. He had a really tough offensive Mountain West tournament in terms of shooting, but he's such a good assist rate player, and he's actually a pretty good rebounder from his guard position as well. that he can still deliver pretty good fantasy performances even when his shot is not falling. So, prior to that tournament, pretty much before that, he had 4 straight games over 31 DraftKings points. That's pretty solid. And I'm definitely willing to go to him. Like, y'all, one thing you got to remember about this slate, like if we get the portalings that we think we're going to get, if we get the guys missing in action that we think we're going to get, there's going to be some elite value on this slate. And so you can really go stars and scrubs, and Degenhart and Cardenas are 2 stars that I would certainly be very interested in playing because of their profiles. Now, I'm also pretty interested in Andrew Meadow. If you've never seen him, he's a really interesting looking guy. He's a pretty good player as well, really good rebounder. I don't mind going to him at $6,300, but I definitely would rather get up to Degenhart and Cardenas. They just have better rates, better profiles to me than Meadow. And then I'm kind of interested in Pearson Carmichael. He's a freshman that they moved into the starting lineup that they're really excited about in Boise. It would not shock me to see them give him boosted minutes in this, that, try to develop him, try to get him to be a little bit better heading into next year. And he's only $4,600. I thought he was going to be cheaper than that. But I think he's kind of worth a look, because if everybody is playing all of these value plays from all the portalings, then a guy like Carmichael is going to be virtually unowned. And one of the quickest ways to win in DFS is to play players that are very low owned that end up playing really well, right? And he could be a guy that ends up being that. All right, let's go ahead and take a quick breather, and then we're going to break down the next 2 games. Now, before we continue, I do want to mention there are places where you can get more information from me. First off, you can follow me on Twitter at Mike's Money Picks. I am more than happy to answer any questions if you reach out to me on Twitter, as well as tweet out all updates for the show. So if you just want to stay up to date with what we got going on, that would be a place you can stay informed. Also, if you want to ask any questions, that's what I'm there for. I'm also in the Fantasy Corner Discord. The link is in the description on YouTube as well as on the audio feed. Fantasy Corner Discord is a community of a bunch of really good, really smart people who play DFS for a lot of different sports, and college basketball is one of them. We've got a lot of people in there who are really in tune with starting lineups, injury news, coaching news, all that stuff. And so it's just a great place to get that information, but also talk lineups, talk strategy with a bunch of people who are really smart, really know what they're doing. And then it's just also a great place to just sweat it out and watch the games together. It's an absolute blast. I cannot recommend it enough. And even if you're thinking, well, college basketball is over, why would I want to join that? College basketball is not the only sport in there. We got every other sport covered as well. And if you want to know who actually makes my DFS lineups, head on over to the patreon.com/Mike's Money Picks. I have an article for every single college basketball DFS slate with my core plays, as well as a write-up as to why they are my core plays. So you can get that information on there as well. All right, let's go ahead and dive into game number 3. This is the one of the biggest contrasts of games, in my opinion, because you've got one team that is fully together and one team that is totally not. So we've got Nebraska taking on Arizona State. KenPom has this one as Nebraska 74-71. That has a game total of 145 points, which ranks 3rd on this slate. Big reason why is because both these teams are like just kind of decent in all categories, right? Nebraska, 70th offensive efficiency, 45th defensive efficiency, 171st in tempo. Arizona State's 81st on offense, 73rd on defense, and 114th on tempo. So both the tempo ratings are pretty solid, and you've got 2 good shooting teams. Also, both of these teams are like poor rebounding teams. So like it's just, I don't know what I think you're going to see a decent amount of offense in this game is the bottom line, right? So for Nebraska, they're very intact except for 2 players, and they don't really matter a whole lot, right? So basically, oh, hold on, wait a minute. What happened with Raleigh Worcester? Wow, this is brand new. Okay, so I had not seen this when I was doing my research. Apparently, Raleigh Worcester is out for this college basketball crown. That was not something that came up in my research. Braxton Maya is also a game time decision for this game. I don't think that it's necessarily likely that he plays. He had been injured heading into the Big Ten tournament, hadn't played once in the month of March. So I don't think it's likely that Mia plays. But wow, seeing that news that Worcester is out, that's kind of a big one. So that kind of changes my research, because I did not know that was going to be the case. But anyway, I can kind of audible here. Nebraska's starters from their last Big Ten tournament game were Bryce Williams, Sam Hoiberg, Rolly Wooster, Juwan Gary, and Burka Butensel. Connor Segan and Andrew Morgan were their 2 key players off the bench. What I think would end up happening is, with Wooster out, I think that Connor Segan would move into the starting lineup. Segan's kind of a similar player, very hot and cold shooter, but he can get really hot. I think he's a really gifted, really talented offensive player. I've been on the Connor Segan truther train, which is hard to say, for about 3 years now, saying that he should be playing more for Wisconsin and then Nebraska. And so, if Wooster is out, I do think this could give you a ton of minutes for a season, could give you a ton of upside for him, as well as Sam Hoiberg down here at $4,800. He's another guy that, hot and cold shooter, kind of like his dad, and he could end up being pretty solid for you as well. But this Nebraska team is really being led by Bryce Williams and Juwan Gary. Bryce Williams ended the season with 4 of his last 6 games over a 32% usage rate, had the huge 53 fantasy point performance against Ohio State. And this Arizona State team is a team we've seen get obliterated defensively at times. So I think Bryce Williams, getting a guy that's going to have the ball in his hands a ton, I'd really like the idea of getting him into a lot of lineups here on this Monday slate. And then Juwan Gary's also been really, really good for Nebraska. 35 DraftKings points in both their most recent games. Really solid power forward type of play that's been taking a lot of shots, over 13 shots in his last 4 games. So I do like the idea of getting up to Williams and Gary. Maybe not both of them in the same lineup, but definitely getting one of them because, like I said, with it being a huge stars and scrubs slate, those are stars that you're going to want to pay up for. Now, Buchtenzel, and I hope I'm saying that right. So, largely most of the season, because a lot of college basketball takes place when my daughter is asleep, I'm usually watching college basketball games on mute, or I've got the YouTube TV quad box, shout out YouTube TV, where it's 4 games on and you can only put the sound on one of them, right? So I haven't been watching a Nebraska game where his name comes up organically from the announcer. So I'm hoping I'm saying it right, but Buchtenzel. He's been pretty solid recently for Nebraska. 21 DraftKings points in their Big Ten tournament game against Iowa. If Maya continues to be out, this is a really poor rebounding Arizona State team that I could see Buchtenzel having a pretty solid game against. All right, now on the Arizona State side, this is a team that is in total disarray. They might have 6 total scholarship players in this game. All right, so what has happened already is Jaden Quaintance has been hurt. He has not played since February 23rd. I don't get why he would play in this, honestly. He could be a potential one and done. He could be an NBA draft pick. I don't see why he would want to play in this format. If he does play, I think he's a great play, but I don't think that it's likely that he does. And then you've also seen a ton of just kind of portaling, dismissal from team. They're not going to have a lot of guys, right? So Josen Sannon is in the transfer portal. He's already committed to St. John's. Now, DraftKings does not have him marked out for the college basketball crown, but he's literally already committed to St. John's. Why would St. John's be okay with him playing in this? I don't think he plays. Austin Nunez is also listed as out. That one was kind of a shocker for me. He kind of played a few minutes for them at the guard spot at the start of the season, but I assume it's a season-ending injury. I could not find any information on that. And then you also have BJ Freeman, who was dismissed from the team around the end of February. So obviously he has not played since then. Obviously he will not be playing in this. So with all those guys being out, what you're left with is 6 scholarship players for this Arizona State team. And so what it's likely to be is it'll be Alston Mason at point, Adam Miller at the 2, Amir Ali at the 3, Bashir Jihad at the 4, and Sean Phillips at the 5, with Trevor Best as their bench option, as well as Bobby Hurley's kid, Bobby Hurley, as a walk-on who is probably going to see minutes as well. What you can do for this is you can actually look back. They played games with only 6 scholarship players. It was a different combination because of the injuries that they were dealing with. One of them, Mason, was out. One of them, Adam Miller, was out. But the recent Utah and BYU games, they played with only 6 scholarship players. So you can kind of see what their rotations look like in those games. What I can tell you about those games is that they really played through the guards. Jihad and Phillips played a crap ton of minutes as bigs, and they kind of got tired. They kind of didn't have a whole lot of usage, especially in the second half. They really played through the guards. They were kind of letting the bigs rest offensively in a way. And so I would expect that to be the case again here. Alston Mason's probably a guy that's going to have the ball in his hand a ton. And we see that in the Arizona game recently. He shot 17 shots, put up 51 total DraftKings points in that game. It would not shock me to see Mason have another huge game just because he is going to have to be the offensive creator for this team. The other offensive creator could be Adam Miller, who's been up and down this season, but the minute totals have been pretty consistently there. He's only $3,800. I think he's way too low of a price tag for a guy that's probably going to have to play 30 plus minutes given their situation. And then, as I mentioned earlier, Trevor Best, he's only $3,200. You look at those 2 games, the Utah and BYU games, when he played 20 plus minutes, he put up 25 and 15 DraftKings points in those 2 games. That'll do at a salary of $3,200. So I think he's a guy you got to be interested in as well. I think Jihad could be interesting because Nebraska is not a great rebounding team, not great against bigs. He is more of an offensive threat than Sean Phillips. But like I said, I really expect them to play through a lot of the guards here in this matchup. All right, now this last game of the day, Georgetown and Washington State has a team that is probably in the most interesting situation out of any on the day, and that's Washington State. More on them in a second. KenPom has this game projected to be 78-74 in favor of the Hoyas. That is a total of 152 points. That is the highest on the entire slate. Georgetown ranks 143rd in offensive efficiency, 56th in defensive efficiency, and 120th in tempo. So they're not exactly a great matchup, but Washington State is. They're 91st on offense, 197th on defense, and 33rd in tempo. So Washington State, a team that does not play a lot of defense, that does look to push the pace at any time they can, that is an elite level shooting team, but very much has turnover issues, very much is a poor defensive rebounding team. That is an opportunity for this Georgetown team, to me, to put up a lot of fancy points. And so who's going to be putting up the fancy points for this Georgetown team? Well, they have Drew Fielder that is in the portal. He's listed as questionable on DraftKings, again, because he's kind of in that situation where, yeah, he's in the portal, but like, we don't know for certain if he's going to play or not. I don't know. Like I would tend to think that if a guy's in the portal, why would they want to play in this? Because like, would you really want to get hurt and mess up your career for your next team? I don't know. But everything we're doing here is conjecture because we don't know for certain whether these guys are playing or not, right? And then also we have Caleb Williams, who is injured, missed the last game against DePaul, missed the last 2 games against DePaul, actually. And so we don't really know what the situation is. I couldn't find out anything on this because when you search Caleb Williams in Twitter, they're not talking about this Caleb Williams. So pretty much I would just assume he's not going to be back for this game. And so if Fielder is out, then what you're going to be left with is a starting lineup of Jaden Epps, Malik Mack, Curtis Williams, Micah Peavy at the 4, and then Jordan Burks at the 5. So there's also one other center. They have Julius Halaifanua, who is playing at the start of the year. Apparently he got hurt. If he was not hurt, I would assume he would be the starting center in this game, but I do think he's hurt, judging by the fact that he was a part of the rotation and hasn't been a part of the rotation since November. And then Drew McKenna would be the other backup big. He's actually played a little bit in recent games. He would be the one backup big that they would have. And then Kayvon Mulready would be the one backup guard that they would have if we do get Fielder and Williams both out, right? So if that's the situation, here's what you need to know. Micah Peavy is probably the best play on the entire slate. He's going to play the entire game. He can absolutely fill up a stat sheet. Great rebounding rates, solid assist player as well, averages about 6 boards and 4 assists per game. And he's also the team's usage leader more often than not. And you look at his recent game log, though, he's priced at $10,000. Last 2 games are 43 and 48. That'll do. But also, you look back a little further back, there was a run of 53, 62, 52 in there. Like, he can absolutely fill up the stat sheet. And to me, he's the top overall play on the slate. I'm going to be having him in a ton of my lineups. When it comes to Epps versus Mack, ever since Epps returned from his injury, he has been the player who has played more minutes and taken more shots and seen more usage than Malik Mack. So if you're choosing between the two of them, I would lean Epps. Personally. And I think that with this being a really solid matchup against Washington State, I think Epps could have himself a big game as well. Burks is super interesting to me without Fielder. Like, he's going to have to play a ton. He's going to have to put up a lot of stats. And we've seen it in his last 4 games. He's got 3 games over 26 DraftKings points. So I'm kind of in on Burks as well. Williams and Mulready are kind of just like cardio guys. I'm not super interested in them. I really am more interested in the top 3 guys on this Georgetown team: Peavy, Epps, and Burks. Now, on the Wazoo side, they're in an interesting situation. So they have a ton of portaling going on already, right? So their entire guard rotation is either injured or in the portal. Cedric Coward is out for the season. Nate Calmise is in the portal. Isaiah Watts is in the portal. And then backup guard Marcus Wilson is in the portal. Here's the thing. If none of those guys play, they don't have a point guard. That's the boat that they're in. If none of those guys play, they don't have a point guard. What would happen if that were the case, right? Is Lawan Watts would play the point forward, which he has actually done at various points this season. I think Lawan Watts, as long as those other guys are out, is one of the best plays on the slate. because you've got a guy who can absolutely already fill up a stat sheet on his own, who's going to be asked to fill in the role of a guard as well as his normal role as a small forward. Like, this is a great spot for him at $8,800. I'm going to be super intrigued to play him as long as we get the news that Cal Meese and company are all not playing in this game, right? So if that is the case, what would the starting lineup look like? Well, it would be Lawan Watts as the point forward. Parker Garrett's is like one of the only guards remaining, but he's not a true point guard. So I don't think he would be a big time usage guy, but at $3,100, he's probably going to fall into some stats. At the 3, you would see Tomas Thrastarsson, who played a ton of minutes when Isaiah Watts was hurt early in the season, had a few big games in January because of it. I could see him absolutely turning in another big game off of that. At the 4, I would expect it to be Richard Zvavers. I hope I'm saying that correctly. He's been a part of the rotation recently as just kind of this backup 3-4 guy. And then at the 5, I would expect it to be Ethan Price, who's a really solid play in his own right. 5 straight games over 27 DraftKings points. Really solid play, especially if he's at the 5. Because, oh, by the way, I kind of buried the lead on this one. Dane Erikstrup, their normally starting center, got hurt in their conference championship or conference tournament game against San Francisco. Did not play the entire second half, was in street clothes. I would tend to think that he wouldn't play in this one if he's got any kind of nagging injury. We don't really know any up-to-date information on it, but if Erikstrup is out, then Ethan Price at the 5 would be very valuable. And you would really have Vavers and Okafor as the only other guys that would really be playing at the forward position. And then Case Why Not down here at $3,000. Literally, his last name exemplifies my thoughts for him on this slate. Why not? Because basically, if they're out of guards, he's going to have to play a little bit, and he has played at various points in the season. Hasn't really done a whole lot, but like, he's $3,000. He's going to probably play 20 plus minutes. Why not? Pun intended. All right, so that does it for this slate. Like I said, y'all, there's a lot of conjecture going on because there's going to be a lot of news to pay attention to. Getting the starting lineups for these games is going to be super duper important in terms of making sure that you're actually building viable DraftKings lineups as opposed to just building dead lineups that are just going to be screwed if somebody is unexpectedly in or out. So I do think that this is a slate where you're going to have to be checking news. You're going to have to be close to your phone to make sure that you do have live lineups. Or like I said earlier, hey, just don't bet or don't play with any money that you're not willing to lose, because you're probably going to play some dead lineups if you're not sitting by your phone or sitting by your computer for the entire slate. So anyway, hopefully we gave you guys all the information you need in order to build some winning DraftKings lineups or winning player props or winning parlays here for this 4-game slate. I'm looking forward to watching more college basketball. Like, I don't know about y'all, but like, college basketball is like on. I'm going to be watching it. And even if it is, the college basketball crown as opposed to the NCAA tournament, I'm still going to be watching it, which, by the way, we've got an all-1 seed final for y'all. And I think it's very clearly the 4 best teams in college basketball. Very much looking forward to the Final Four this week. We will have an episode breaking down the Final Four DFS slate once DraftKings and FanDuel do come out with the prices on that. So we'll have full breakdowns of those 2 games. So make sure you are subscribed to the channel. That way you can be with us for that. And I know it's the end of college basketball season, y'all, but as the calendar turns, so do we. So, as this season is ending, we're going to turn into pretty much a golf show for a little bit, and then it'll be a best ball show, and then we're going to be a college football show, and then we're going to be right back to being a college basketball show. So make sure you're subscribed so that we can be with us for the entire calendar year, especially when we come back next college basketball season, because, we will be back. All right, but that's going to do it for this episode, y'all. If this video helped you out in any way, please hit the like button. It helps me out a ton. You guys do that. We're closing in on 1,000 subscribers, so please help me out if you have not already. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel so that way we can get to our goal of getting to 1,000 before the NCAA tournament is over. Time is running out in that regard. But anyway, yeah, that's going to do it, y'all. I hope y'all are looking forward to this new tournament as much as I am. Like I said, I'm just looking forward to having more college basketball on my TV and more college basketball DFS to play. Best of luck to you guys here on this Monday slate. Thank you guys for watching and listening to this point, and I will see you guys next time.